So, well, I mean, how has the Irish tour gone so far?
Well, so far so good. I mean, we just started pretty much. We've, what are we, 2 shows in at this point of a pretty long tour. And the start of every tour is always, it's kind of our time to figure out what we're doing, because my brother Jack, my bass player, lives in Oregon, and myself and Nan, who's singing and playing keyboard with us, we both live in New York City, and our drummer Dave lives in England, so we're sort of all spread across about 6,000 miles. So the first show of any tour is when we all reunite, haven't seen each other in ages. We just get on stage and say, hey, how you doing? Let's try to remember how to play all these songs that we've never all 4 played together before. So, it's pretty fun just banging all the parts into shape.
The new record that's coming out, it's actually coming out on Friday, I believe, here. Jack didn't contribute to it. This is the first one that you just did yourself, yeah?
Yeah, well, like I say, Jack's been living, I'm in New York City, and Jack's 3,000 miles out west on the West Coast. He's been living in Oregon for a couple of years. And I recorded the new record in England at the end of a tour I did there in January. So I was pretty much with some of the people that I was doing that tour with. We just went into the studio at the end of the tour and just started putting some stuff together and seeing what came out of it. It was not very prearranged, but some of the songs were things that I've been doing live for a couple of years, and some of it was new stuff. And we weren't really sure if it was going to turn into an album. We just thought it was a nice recording studio and a nice bunch of musicians, so we just started laying down tracks and kind of just developed in pretty quick time into a pretty good album.
Generally, do you approach an album that way, where you're not really thinking about the end product, it's more about the process?
Well, this album was sort of intentionally done as a not overthought thing. I feel like my last album, MRI, was done in a very slow sort of tinkering over a long period of time, because it was recorded at my friend's studio in New York City, so I had a lot of access to be able to return over and over again, and kind of, we recorded a whole lot of songs, and it was, I could sort of really take my time over the course of about a year and a half to pick out which songs I wanted to go on the album, and then what instruments to put on them, and all of this sort of thing. That was done over about a year and a half of recording the MRI album. But then this past December, I recorded an album with Peter Stamfel, who's an old New York City folk musician. He's like in his mid-70s. And we recorded an album very rapidly, just in a couple of days at a studio. We got a bunch of really good musicians and just got in, showed them the songs, and just played it. And that felt so good to just kind of like, knock out and out, just get in a bunch of really good musicians, a bunch of great songs, and just roll the tape. And I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of a way that I can combine the in the moment feeling of a lo-fi album with the more expanded sound palette of a kind of multi-instrumental, more produced album. And I wanted to take that idea, the way that I recorded the album with Peter Stamfel, and do that with an album of my own stuff. So I got a bunch of good musicians together in a room in a nice studio, but then just sort of let the tape fly. The Misfits are cult rock and roll, worshipped by a few but ignored on the whole. Meet the Feebles is a film cult classic. It's basically unknown, but some say it's fantastic. Most women that I meet seem totally unfazed, till sometimes there's somebody who seems totally amazed. I might not be in magazines as a heartthrob face, but in a few devoted hearts I found a strong fan base. I'm a cult boyfriend, not a mainstream show. I'm lonely or I'm worshipped by a lady in the know. When you're a cult boyfriend, life is always intense. They love me or they hate me, no one's on the fence. Cerebus is a cult comic book series. It's got fans, but it's never found in movies or in theories. WFMU is a cult radio station, always tuned to by a few devoted fans around the nation. For every time I couldn't get a second date or even first, why does one think I'm the best when all the rest think I'm the worst? All of those times no one at all wanted to know if I'm really all that awesome, wouldn't more people think so? I guess cult boyfriend is the term for me. It's always been quality, not quantity. A cult boyfriend's like a record in a bargain bin. No one knows its worth till a collector comes in. cult literary names I can honor. Maybe J.G. Ballard or Flannery O'Connor. Haggis and fugu, that's like food for cult eaters. Jim Jones, Charles Manson, Father Yod, they're cult leaders. Anyway, the point being, do I have to be magical? Can't we date a few months, then move on, normal and casual? Suicidally alone and then totally smothered. It's so much pressure when you go from one extreme to the other. I guess cult boyfriend is the term for me. It's always been quality, not quantity. A cult boyfriend's like a record in a bargain bin. No one knows its worth till a collector comes in. I'm a cult boyfriend, not a mainstream show. I'm lonely or I'm worshipped by a lady in the know. When you're a cult boyfriend, life is always intense. They're in love or they're indifferent, no one's on the fence. This song probably ain't gonna go very far beyond an open mic. It's guaranteed though, 2 or 3 people are really gonna like it. Hi, I'm Jeffrey Lewis, and you're listening to Two States on RTE 2XM.
When you collaborate with somebody like Peter Stampfler, anyone you care to name, do you have to be less precious about it? Do you have to kind of step back a bit?
Yeah, a big part of collaborating, I mean, even within my own band, when it's myself and my brother, I'm sure anybody with siblings knows the different dynamics of working together and on different projects, and there's always a bit of give and take, and you can't, impose your own idea of things onto everybody else all the time. And in the give and take of ideas, you start to see some angles on things that you couldn't have gotten to on your own. So there's a lot of good that can come out of collaboration. And I particularly, I like to show people songs without telling them what the parts quite are, because you end up with instrumental parts that you could never have come up with on your own. You just kind of, rather than saying these are the chords, it's just like start playing it and see what people come up with, feeling their way around in the dark. And you just land on things that if it sounds right, then it's right, rather than worrying about whether, like, this is an E, so an E is correct. Sometimes if you just don't tell people what to do, you just land in a place that you could never have arrived at otherwise.
Working with Jack, I imagine it's quite intuitive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody, and in addition to my brother Jack, our drummer Dave is somebody that I've known for a very long time, and we went to school together when we were younger. And you travel in a band with people, and at a certain point, the level of familiarity rises to where there's not much need for politeness. If somebody does something you don't like, they have no reason not to tell me, like, Jeff, that sucks the way you're singing that, or that guitar part was terrible. So there's no reason to step lightly around trying to explain to somebody that you think they made a mistake or that they could do it a better way. And actually, we just bought one of these recording devices. I don't know if it's the exact same one.
This is a Zoom handy recorder, yeah. H2 I'm holding at the moment.
It's the exact one we just got in Germany a few weeks ago. Because Peter Stampfler actually turned me on to the usage of one of when I was touring with him last January. He had one of those, and for recording the show each night and then listening to it the next day in the car on your way to the next show, you can really see, like, oh, that didn't work. That sounded great when that accidentally happened. Let's try to keep that. So that's been an interesting new thing that we're trying to do as well, especially with Nan Turner in the band. She's playing keyboards, and I've been playing with her in New York for a bit, but this is her first time playing with Jack and Dave. So there's a lot of things that, when you have 4 different people's perspective on it, it's a lot easier to just kind of go to the recording and say, rather than everybody having a different opinion of, like, no, I swear I didn't do a drum fill on that bridge. Like, no, I'm sure you did. You just go back to the tape and I'm like, see, right there, that was what I liked. Do that again.
Okay. So, but I mean, you can't, hold it against them and be like, well, I have proof here that you f***ed up at this moment. I have it 23. Things could get a little fractured if you do that.
Yeah, well, we love doing that. You can create your best of mixed CD compilation of all my favorite times that Jack screwed up on bass.
Do you feel compelled to write songs?
No, well, I guess I do when I do, but I don't that often. I feel as though it's more of a procrastination device when I'm supposed to be doing other things. Like if I'm, meant to wash the dishes or I'm meant to be working on a comic book, that's when it suddenly seems very much more appealing to like sit, and mess around on a guitar and maybe come up with something. I never feel drawn to doing what I ought to be doing. I feel as though everything that I've done is essentially just a way to not do something else. I mean, drawing comics was... So I never went to school for art. It was just something that I was doing in my notebooks instead of taking notes in classes that I was in. And then when I graduated and I was like, oh, now I can really become an artist, and I would sit working on my comic books at home, that was when I started to write songs on guitar, because I would just be sitting at that desk and being like, oh, maybe I should just go mess with this guitar instead. So, it just kind of goes around and around. As long as I keep enough creative tools on hand, then, at least I'll be distracted by getting something done in some other field. But I barely play guitar at all. I mean, as anybody could tell from hearing me, I very rarely pick up the guitar. I mean, my band just never even we barely even rehearse. We're like, in our 10-year career, we've probably spent about 5 days rehearsing total.
Well, I mean, you've done well on the back of those 5 days.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I think that playing live is the best possible environment for creation and rehearsal, because I think, when you play in a sort of sterile recording rehearsal space, you get used to that environment, and that kind of... I feel like that comes across in a lot of bands playing live. They just sound like they're in a rehearsal room. They're just playing their parts, and they're not... See, I always think of it... I heard a great interview with the band Can, and I forget who it was. One of the musicians in Cannes with a German name that I'm not going to pronounce right, maybe Holger Kazuki, or whatever the hell his name is, was saying that they think of music more like sports, and that really stuck with me, because if you think of theater is something that's pre-scripted, and like you learn your lines and you get on stage and you do those lines to the best of your ability, and sports, it's like you don't know what the heck's going to happen. You just get out on that court and you just fight for your life. And sometimes you fall on your face, and you hope the crowd is rooting for you, but they don't expect you to win all the time. They just expect you to give it your best shot. Sometimes you do a great job, and sometimes you have a winning season, and then sometimes you don't. But I like that idea of being in the moment and playing it more like a sports game. Like you get on stage and you're just kind of fighting for your life with like, what do I do now? And I feel like the audience picks up on that energy to a certain extent, and they can kind of tell that when you actually do something correct, it's not like, oh, of course he did it correct. He's played it that way a million times. They know exactly what they're doing. It's a little bit more surprise. It's like watching a bit of a tightrope act, and the thrill of something coming across really well has a certain spark of life to it, because nobody's really sure if it's going to work. I think. I don't know. I mean, that could also be why we've been doing this 10 years and nobody's ever heard of us.
You signed to Rough Trade, and okay, you may say nobody's heard of you, but would you feel like that was, in ways, a turning point in which this... Can't say career. Do we say career? You know what I'm getting at?
It's been a living, yeah.
Was that the turning point, Rough Trade getting involved?
Absolutely. I have no idea what would have happened if Jeff Travis at Rough Trade hadn't just offered to start putting my stuff out. I don't even know why he's still putting my stuff out, but he keeps doing it, and I certainly appreciate it. It wasn't as though other labels were ever beating down my door. I was just essentially playing at open mics. I was making cassettes of my own stuff. I was kind of the last person to switch over to CDs. I was still making tapes, and it was 98, 99, even 2000, I was still making tapes. And then in early 2001, I got the email from Rough Trade that was like, we heard some of your stuff. And it was from the Moldy Peaches, had taken some of the stuff from my tapes and put it on a CD and given it to Rough Trade without me even knowing about it. So that was really a nice surprise. And I'm just like the luckiest guy in the music business, because I never had to, I don't think I ever would have had the guts to shop my stuff around to labels. It just never seemed like the kind of thing that anybody would go for. My whole idea from the get-go was, if I just make songs that I feel really good about, that these songs that are really powerful to me, and just put them on tapes and sell the tapes real cheap. I would always sell them for like $3 at my shows, and I was like, if people like any of the songs, then they'll tape them for other people, and it'll just kind of spread around to wherever it needs to spread around to. Whoever likes this stuff can spread it on their own. And I was very against kind of pushing myself. I was like, just let the music live on its own. If it has legs to get around on its own, then let that happen. And the idea of touring was never a thought. The idea of like having a band, making studio recordings, never entered my mind. I was going to draw comic books, and if I made songs on the side, if people liked them, then that was great. So Rough Trade was like, I probably would have signed to any label that wanted to put the stuff out. It was just a real stroke of luck that it happened to be, a really great indie label who has put out a lot of records that I personally love. So I feel very honored that they were into doing that.
Walking up 23rd Street, I was tired and alone. It was late, my housemate would be asleep when I got home. The sign ahead, glowing red, said the Chelsea Hotel, where Nancy and Sid Vicious and my friend Dave once dwelled. The street was black under my feet, which continued their walking, though I was vaguely interested in the folks behind me talking. Two guys, maybe gay, wearing raver-type suits, and a girl wearing glasses who looked kinda cute. Her hair was short and curly, she had a tattoo on her back, which I could see 'cause her red shirt was sleeveless with straps. But I only saw this later, not in my first glance, but I could hear her talking behind me, and as if by chance, she was trying to describe a song I knew well, Leonard Cohen's song about the Chelsea Hotel. And I smiled a smile to myself when she said that it's the song where he talks about someone giving him head on a bed that's unmade, and how the song was outrageous. And that's when I got uncharacteristically courageous. I could have left the three of them laughing and just gone on home, but I turned and I faced her and I said, Leonard Cohen, just like that. She was shocked and surprised, but she looked very happy that she now had a witness to back up her story. She looked at me with her spectacled eyes and said, see, I told you, to the two other guys. My tale might have ended right there and then, but we started talking about Leonard Cohen and how his lyrics were cool and how he sang so sincere that it must have been true, and it happened right here. And though usually women right off the bat don't find me that great, but there we were, laughing and strolling like we could really relate. And though we didn't mention the headline, it was alluded, and our conversation was better because her friends weren't included. The guys were more into each other, at least that's how it seemed to me. I heard the faint knocking of opportunity, although it's easy for me now, upon my looking back, to think of all the things I could have said to make me the Mac. Just keep the sad truth in mind as I tell this to you, that we really only talked for a minute or two, and I never got her name and she never got mine, but in those couple short minutes we had a pretty good time. And on top of that, though you may not believe it, listen to what she said to me next as I repeated that line about getting the blowjob that Leonard sings. She said it made her want to do naughty things, and right about then I should have asked if she knew what the Chelsea charged if we got a room for two. But I didn't, and I know I'm a schmuck, don't you doubt it. The only thing I did was write this stupid song about it. But if I was Leonard Cohen or some other songwriting master, I'd know to first get the oral sex and then write the song after. You can practice writing songs about romance every day, But if you haven't loved, then you'll have nothing to say. We could have given each other a head on Leonard's same unmade bed, but I was too shy to suggest it. And so instead, when the three of them stopped to look through a pub window, I said goodnight, though I hadn't quite meant to, and waved as we walked, though I wouldn't forget her, especially since she mysteriously said, "See you later." So now every time I'm walking, I hope that we'll meet, and on purpose I always go up 23rd Street, where the sign glowing red says the Chelsea Hotel, where Nancy and Sid Vicious and my friend Dave once dwelled. Life doesn't work out the way it does in old songs. That's why we sing new ones, to say what really goes on. Though if I could see her again and we could pick up right where it ended, maybe I'd play her the song and maybe she wouldn't get too offended. Now listen and I'll tell you why. There's more to this situation than meets the eye. You may think it's sad, you may think it's pathetic, that I sing this song and that she'll never know it. But think a minute about what that means, and you'll realize it's actually a wonderful thing, that all around the world there may be folks singing tunes for the love of other folks that they barely knew. And it puts a smile on my face, yes it do, and let me tell you, you ought to be smiling too, because the next time you're feeling kind of lonesome and blue, just think that someone somewhere might be singing about you. So who knows if I ever see her again, maybe we'll see. This whole time she could have been singing about me. Probably not, but it could be.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Lewis, and you're listening to Two States on RTE 2XM.
Do you still doubt yourself as a songwriter after 6 albums? Is there still moments where you think, I don't feel like I'm any good today, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's, probably anybody feels that at certain points about what they do. I guess for myself, I do feel like what I do is really, really good in a certain way that I'm often surprised that it seems to appeal to so many other people. Like from the very beginning when I first started making songs, I knew that, what I love about music is in a lot of what I do. So I know it's the kind of stuff that I would love. If I heard somebody play it for me, or if I stumbled into a pub where somebody like me was playing, I would really love that music and that band or those recordings. And I figured that everywhere in the world there would be a few people that would also be into that. But that, in my mind, was, maybe 10 people in every city, if I was lucky. And now it seems like, maybe there's 100 people in every city, or some cities, maybe 200 people. I think, really, it's the internet that has... It was kind of my original thought of, like, if the songs kind of spread. Yeah. But in my mind, I was thinking... 1990s thinking of like, it's on tape. Somebody can do a high-speed dub of the tape and give it to a friend. And it was kind of right before the internet really. So So I feel as though my idea of it, has kind of translated into the internet in a way that has really benefited me.
Yeah. I mean, coming back to that idea of being yourself, I imagine you're very satisfied yourself with the work. That's what you're kind of saying to me, yeah?
Just to a certain extent. I mean, some more than others. There is some songs that I'm very pleased with and proud of. Other songs that, I like some of it, but there's a few parts that I wish could be better. Or, well, see, the weird thing is once I started touring and performing, you realize how much that does or doesn't relate to other people's opinions. Because there's songs that I feel very proud of that you play live and it's just like... It doesn't seem to go over as much as other songs that I'm like, they're nice songs, I guess, but they seem to be like the big hits in a live environment. So that you sort of have to sometimes think, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, maybe those guys know better than I do which material of mine is the better material or not.
Well, having toured the world now and put out as many albums as you have, can you be too self-aware in your songwriting? Do you have to switch off and just be as unconscious as possible?
That's really the difficult thing, I think, for anybody when anybody starts paying attention to you, you fall into you're like, oh, can I write this? A lot of my earliest songs on like my first album, I don't know if I could have written those if I had the thought that anybody would be hearing them or that they would be live songs. I mean, I feel like so many of my early songs, I would have written the first line and then just like scratched it out or been like, I can't say that in front of people, because there was no in front of people. And that, you can't really get around that. Like once if I make a recording now, even if it doesn't sell in vast quantities, no matter what I record at this point, somebody's going to hear it. There's got to be, 1,000 Jeffrey Lewis fans in the world that'll probably listen to anything that I do, or maybe 10,000, I don't know. Maybe 100,000. It's really hard to tell nowadays with the internet. I know my album sales are like minuscule in terms of the music industry, but people out there seem to know the stuff everywhere. So, we play in New Zealand, we play in China, Israel, Russia, like we're all over the place, and people know the songs. People just hear this stuff regardless of album sales. So every time I write a song, it's like some of these people are gonna be hearing it. So it's very hard to like just block that out and be like, just let the song come out.
Do words always trump music for you? Do you always feel like it's just a vehicle for your words?
Yeah, but I think I don't know. I guess it's hard to say, because you look at like Stairway to Heaven, and it's this masterpiece of a song that like millions and millions of people not only enjoy listening to, but get like this emotional fulfillment out of it. Takes you on this like emotional journey, and it really moves you in this sort of indescribable way. Whether you're sick of hearing Led Zeppelin or not, there's a power to some songs in the world that you can't see. You look at the lyrics and you're like, what the hell is that about? Like, what does that mean? I mean, Robert Plant was 22 when he wrote it, or 23? He couldn't have been older than 24 or 25, just writing out a bunch of gobbledygook. Now, why does it work? I don't know. So maybe lyrics aren't that important, but at the same time, there is something in those words, or in the words of any song, that really reaches people, that I don't think anybody, I don't think you can come up with a chord progression or a drum beat that like is going to move people like that. It's got to be in the words. Even if you can't figure out why it's in the words, it's still in the words. It doesn't matter how well you play guitar, how well you sing, how well you play drums. If you don't have the words that are gonna say something, then the rest of it is kind of meaningless. And if you have the words that say something, then the rest of it is meaningless. Because if you have the words, then who cares how crummy you sing, how crummy you play guitar, how crummy your drumming is? Those songs are gonna move people. People can play them on the street, whatever. The musicianship is negligible.
Back when I was 4 and I knew the name of every dinosaur, I learned how to read comic books. My babysitter said I was really smart. When the lights went out, everything changed. The radio music made me feel strange, and I had a real bad dream about a gorilla in the bathroom. And back when I was 6, I took everything real serious, and I thought that every song that came on the radio was referring to strange sexual acts, because they thought I wouldn't know the facts. And being small is hard, and no one ever tells you how. And back when I was 8, I would sit outside on an old milk crate and look out at the world from the stoop across the street. The boom boxes and the hot concrete, and every Halloween they hung a million rubber skeletons across 9th Street. And back when I was 12 or so, I swear to God I never felt so low. Everyone but me was making out and eating cookies. I had more than my brain could stand. I threw my life in a garbage can. I felt so weird I had to disappear, and crying suicide disease. And at 15 getting stoned felt good, and it sent me back to childhood. Had nothing ever mattered to me more than that. But then 16 became eclipse, my brain became apocalypse. I was lost and found, and I've never been the same. And back when I was 22, I left the best thing that I knew, and I gave it up for fortune and for fame. I played like I didn't know how, I shocked the world, I wowed the crowd, but I deserved more than what they gave. And back when I was 27, still nothing had been forgiven. Clay turns into rock, and rock just sits. So sitting on a crowded beach, I'd pretend I was a leech, and I'd stick to things here and there for a little bit. And back when I was 31, I knew I'd become what I'd become. Nothing left to reveal, and there was nowhere else to turn. So shocked and withered, dumb and bitter, and in need of a babysitter, I'd gladly let my hand fall off and burn, burn, burn. Back when I turned the big 4-0, I realized just how much there was to go. And I started to think being alone forever wasn't where it was at. So I took my head out of the window and taught myself how to love real fast. I started talking about painting with a woman in the laundromat. And back when I was 50 and my first wife had just left me, I felt okay and I sang my daughter funny little songs. And just when I thought the best was past, I fell in love for real at last. And it didn't even matter that it had taken me so long. And back when I was 63, the public rediscovered me. My comic books and albums had all become rare cult collector items. And both my parents were deceased, so they didn't see my records get re-released. And I got a dog for the first time in my life. And back when I was 74, my dog died and I got 2 more. I still felt really good about my daughter and also about my girlfriend. And I would sing and draw a little bit, but mostly I would just wake up early and sit and hang out with the puppies and wish that I could live forever. And back when I was 87 and my grandson had just turned 11, my woman was dead and my dogs were getting pretty old. My body didn't work quite like it should, but overall things were pretty good. I was getting decent royalties from the reissued comic books and records. And back when I was 106, my only friend was one goldfish. Everyone I ever knew was dead and gone. And the goldfish never had a name, and the neighbors thought I was insane. And I flushed it down the toilet when I saw it floating upside down. And back when I was 128, I'd sit outside on an old mill crate and look out at the world from the stoop across the street. The boom boxes and the hot concrete, and every Halloween they hung a million rubber skeletons across 9th Street. Every Halloween they hung a million rubber skeletons. Every Halloween they hung a million rubber skeletons. Every Halloween they hung a million rubber skeletons.
Let's talk about the sidewalk scene as it's known now. Is it weird that people have, in a way, an idealized notion of what you guys were doing in the sidewalk cafe like 10 years ago?
Yeah, but the thing is, that scene was going on since the early 80s. It's like, and there's, any open mic is just an open mic that has, it's got some high quality and some low quality. You can still go there any Monday night and probably see, 2 or 3 people that might blow your mind, and then a lot of stuff that won't. And sometimes, some nights better than others. And I think it's just kind of the million monkeys on a million typewriters, or gazillion, infinite monkeys on infinite typewriters. I mean, it's New York City. You've got every single aspiring creative person in the world showing up there. They're not going to get a gig. What are they going to do? They're going to go to an open mic. So you've got this incredible, mill of raw talent passing through. It's inevitable that some of it is going to be really incredible. So that continues to this day. I mean, I can go to Sidewalk and see some person there who's doing something totally amazing, and maybe they'll get known or maybe they won't, but it's there's at least some percentage of really exceptional quality.
I was wondering, is there a particular mantra or quote you live by?
Well, Yeah, probably. Like, there was a guy who used to write Spider-Man comics in the 80s that I read an interview with, and he said something about how he thought the ultimate story was to fall down into a deep, dark hole and then look up and see the face of God. And I'm totally not religious whatsoever, but when I read that, I guess I was a teenager or something, and something really stuck with me, the contrast between tremendous despair and then some hope that you see from the depths of that despair. And I think that's something that has been in a lot of the work that I do. And it's something that's also in a lot of the Grateful Dead, a band that is one of my favorites. I read an analysis of Grateful Dead lyrics similarly a bunch of years back that always stuck with me, about how there's something that a common thread in a lot of Grateful Dead songs over their career is this sense of like what human hope we can bring to an otherwise maybe dark situation. And even though a lot of their songs are dark, there's a kind of humanity. They'll have lines like, "If I knew the way, I would take you home." So the guy, he doesn't know the way, so he can't take you home, but at least he would if he could. Sure. And that's kind of the best we can hope for in this world. So that sort of stuff that I feel like that has informed a lot of my approach to what I think art should do. Just that, we all need to sort of help each other through this life in some way or other, because what else is there to really do with our time?
I don't know, maybe this is a bit of a corny question, but what advice would you have for any struggling songwriters or people thinking about songwriting?
Well, I mean, if I knew how to do it, I would do it more myself. I mean, if I knew how to write great songs, I'd be writing a great one right now. I guess rip off of obscure people so nobody knows that you're doing it. That's good advice. Write a lot of songs, because then, out of every 10 songs you write, maybe one of them is worth holding on to. Like, any album that I put out is actually a best of. I mean, I very rarely, I never put out everything that I write. I just kind of, I end up with a whole pile of songs, and then I'm like, sifting through to try to find 10 or 12 of them that don't suck. And there's, I've got more bad songs than, anybody should. I don't know. I've written more bad songs than anybody else that I could think of who has. But maybe I don't know. Maybe Bob Dylan has a pile of wretched songs. Or I think production and adding stuff is very deceptive. I think a lot of people, I see it a lot at the open mics, and it's very depressing. And it's hard not to fall into that trap. But you think, if I just bought a nicer guitar, if I spent more time in the studio, if I got a better drummer, that would make it better. And there's so many ways to pour more money into it, and the only quality is really just in the song. So it was very good for me to go through many years of not having the opportunity of doing anything fancy, where the only thing was like writing the song. And it was never like, oh, I could make this a good song if I had a nice guitar solo on it. It was only like, is this actually a good song? And that, I still try to stick to that. And I think that that's very useful to keep in mind for anybody, whatever kind of band you're in. Don't add all that extra stuff to it unless like you've got something there in the first place. And I feel like a lot of people go about things backwards.
Roll, bus, roll, take me off. A rolled sweatshirt makes the windows soft. If I fall asleep, don't wake me up. Roll, bus, roll, take me up. Midnight coming on a Monday night. I'm gonna go again because I don't feel right. Backpack, knapsack, bumper car to train. 42nd Street, Greyhound again. Roll, bus, roll, take me off. A rolled sweatshirt makes the windows soft. If I fall asleep, don't wake me up. Roll, bus, roll, take me up. Old bodegas and old street lights. Harlem looks so warm tonight. It's just thinking about pink donuts that makes me want to cry. Till I have to take 2 Tylenols and close my eyes. Roll, bus, roll, take me off. A rolled sweatshirt makes the windows soft. If I fall asleep, don't wake blind for what's her left. No, I don't wanna stay, no, I wanna run. And then the sun setting on my youth makes that old shadow get taller about as long as the bus makes the city behind me get smaller and smaller. It feels better. Roll, bus, roll, take me off. A rolled sweatshirt makes the window soft. If I fall asleep, don't wake me up. Roll, bus, roll, take me up. 2 weeks in England, 2 weeks in town. Another $100 of medication down. Another email that I need to send. Another situation that I have to end. The midnight coming on a Monday night. I'm gonna go again, I might not be alright. It's a bitter pill, and it's still the same. 42nd Street, Greyhound again. And if I get one seat, I hope it's the window. And if I get 2 seats, I'll just lie down. But if I get one seat, and it's just the aisle, I'll be asleep before the second mile. And then the bus is just inside of me. And somewhere inside my brain is me. And somewhere inside me is my brain. And somewhere in my brain is me again. So roll, bus, roll, take me off. A rolled sweatshirt makes the window soft. If I fall asleep, don't wake me up. Roll, bus, roll, take me off.
The new album's called A Turn in the Dream Songs. I was wondering what that particular turn is, or what that's meant to represent.
Well, I didn't really think about it that much when I picked the title. It's a quote from one of the songs on the album, and I guess I was thinking about the fact that there's so many. I mean, there's billions of humans on Earth, and there's billions of animals, and we're just spinning through space with, at any given moment, billions and billions of these brains are dreaming while other billions of them are awake. And so we're just going through this constant cycle of like vast quantities of dreaming brains on one side of the world that kind of fade into the waking brains on the other side, and just spinning around through this cycle of conscious and unconscious in like a really vast numbers. So yeah, the fact that there's always not only just a dark side of the world that's like maybe asleep or not getting light anyway during any 24-hour cycle, but there's also this huge amount of collective unconscious dreaming going on at any period of time. That was sort of the thought behind that line, and then it somehow just sounded like a nice just title for the album, even though I don't know if it makes sense for the entire record. And then I realized that I've done 3 albums now that have songs in the title, like 12 Crass songs and City and Eastern songs, and that was sort of, I just thought about that recently. I was like, oh man, I've done it again. I gotta stop using songs in album titles.
Comics, do you feel like that they're kind of an underrated form of storytelling?
Yeah, but that's kind of what makes them cool. Like the comics always have this a bit of underground cred because they're never quite as flashy as a movie, or they're kind of this like neglected stepchild art form.
Yeah. And
so they're, as a perennial outsider, they've always got a bit of outsider cred, and that kind of keeps them going. But every 5 weeks there's like a newspaper article that's like, comics, the underappreciated medium that now is finally reaching its potential. But they've been running these articles for 20, 30 years now, and but that, it kind of keeps it. It's nice to root for the underdog.
I mean, what I like about comics is just that they're the first thing that kids will actively go and read themselves. The first stories they invest in themselves, which is a very nice notion. When you're writing a comic, do you think of an audience? Is it the same thing as songwriting, where you have to detach, or?
It's a bit different because there's no live interaction. So it's that same feeling of writing a song in your bedroom and then putting it on a tape and putting it out in the world, and you're not there when somebody's experiencing it. So you can get a little more introspective or a little more patient. Yeah, it's a more patient art form in the amount of time it takes to do, and then also it's just not going to be as grabby as other forms of media, music, or anything else that's, comics are just they're just going to sit there quietly and wait for somebody to come to them.
I imagine, what I find anyway, like recording or stuff like that, and I imagine it's the same with comics, is it's a very absorbing process, and there's just something satisfying in being able to absorb yourself in one task.
Yeah, and to work at it and kind of see that you get better at it the more you work at it. That's very satisfying. That's something that I think is different for me than songwriting, because songwriting seems to depend more on just inspiration, and I don't know if I actually get better at it. I just, end up with a pile of songs, and some of them are more inspired than others, but it's not as though my songs get better and better and better over the years, the way that my comics, I've definitely learned how to make comics better and better. And I think it's the same thing probably with making studio recordings or being a guitarist. You can get better. It's a craft that you can get better and better at, but I don't know if inspiration is a craft. It's sort of like, I don't know, it's very mysterious.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us? Any final words of wisdom?
No, except that I'm sure if I were to see or hear this interview, I would be appalled at my own stupidity and annoyingness and obnoxiousness, and I'd be like, the same.
Oh, it's the self-deprecation again.
Well,
wow.
I would balance that by once again saying that if I heard my own recordings and saw myself in concert, I'd be like, I love that guy. He's doing exactly what I want out of music. But if I were to hear myself talk, I'd be like, I just want to murder this guy. What an obnoxious twit.
Well, the thing is, I think in interviews, it's always the interviewer who always gets the bum rap, especially if you see, videos on YouTube. It's always, people have a very harsh opinions when it comes to interviewers and the questions they ask. So
this is all your fault. See,
yeah, exactly. It's all my stupid
so
questions.
Better if as I blame the questions. I'm so much nicer in real life than I come across here.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me, Jeffrey.
No problem. Thanks for hanging out in the cold.
Today I went to Major Maps to remaster my old album, and on the L train in the morning I was pretty sure I saw Will Oldham. He was wearing the same sunglasses he had on stage at the Bowery Ballroom. Had he come to walk among the Williamsburgers of his kingdom, and like the burghers of Calais will a sacrifice be demanded, to offer up our dreams and beg for mercy empty-handed, and hapless in our hipness crowded 5 to an apartment, relegate our dreams to hobbies and deny our disappointment, cause the Stones in 65 want total satisfaction, kid. But the Stones in 69 see grace in just getting what you need. But if that's a victory, then I'd hate to see what I'd look like defeated, cause I know there are those who walk among us who seem to get their dreams unimpeded. Like today when I went to Major Maps to remaster my old album. On the L train in the morning, I was really sure I saw Will Oldham. He was wearing the same sunglasses he had on stage at the Bowery Ballroom. Had he come to walk among the Williamsburgers of his kingdom. You might say now there's a guy who seems to have the world laid out before him, or you might say he's just a rich kid or a fascist or a charlatan. But either way you say it, if you look at indie rock culture, you really can't ignore him, even if at first dismissive. After some listens you'll enjoy him. I was thinking this on the L train, intent on bursting my own bubble. How long should an artist struggle before it isn't worth the hassle, and admit we aren't fit to be the ones inside the castle? This quest for greatness, or at least hipness, just a scam and too much trouble. But then what makes one human being worthy of an easy ride? Born to be a natural artist you love or hate but can't deny, while us minions in our millions tumble into history's chasm. We might have a couple laughs, but we're still wastes of protoplasm. Like today I was gonna waste some time and money to remaster some dumb old album, and on the L train in the morning I was really sure I saw Will Oldham. He was wearing the same big sunglasses he had on stage at the Bowery Ballroom. Had he come to see the strife here in the gutters of his kingdom, where us noble starving artists are striving hard to feed our egos? Our mothers like our music and our friends come see our shows, and if our friends become successful we'll consider them our foes. Go home to our 4 roommates after paying big bucks for rock star shows. What a nightmare, what a horror. I don't want no part of this, just get me off this crazy ride. I'm gonna puke, I'm gonna piss, I'd rather kill myself. I'd rather just relax or not exist. But you say you want to do an email interview, oh what the heck, I can't resist. Hey mom, guess what, today I did another magazine interview. Honey, that's great. great, you're really famous. Yeah, and I'm 27 too. I kind of thought I was going to grow up to do stuff that would benefit humanity, but it's getting harder to tell if this artist's life is even benefiting me. Because today I was going to waste some time and money to remaster some dumb old album, and on the L train in the morning I was totally sure I saw Will Oldham. He was wearing the same big rock star sunglasses he had on stage at the Bowery Ballroom, and since I was feeling in need of answers, I just went right up and asked him. I said, Will, buying Prince Palace, whatever, what do you think about it? Is it worth being an artist or an indie rock star, or are you better off without it? Because, you know, maybe the world would be better if we were all just uncreative drones. No dead childhood dreams to haunt us, a decent job, a decent home. And if we had some extra time, we could do real things to promote peace. Become scientists or history teachers or uncorrupt police at least. Come on, Will, you gotta tell me. I grabbed and shook him by the arm. The L train was leaving Bedford with 10,000 white 20-somethings crowded on. He opened his mouth to speak, but was lost in the rumbling of the wheels. We were thrown together in a corner, and I yelled, tell me, man, for real. You're living comfortably, I assume, even if you're not quite a household name. You've reached a pretty high level of success and critical acclaim. And the L train got to First Avenue, and a bunch of people piled out. I was staring into his sunglasses, and I was really freaking out. I was like, Steamboat Willie, Bonnie Prince of all this shit. You're like the king of a certain genre, but even you must want to quit. Like if you hear a record by Bob Dylan or Neil Young or whatever, you must start thinking, yeah, people like me, but I won't be that good ever. And then I'm sure the thing is probably like Dylan himself too. Stayed up some nights wishing he was as good as Ginsberg or Camus, and he was like, dude, I'm such a faker, I'm just a clown who entertains, and these fools who pay for my crap, they just have pathetic puny brains. And then Camus probably wished he was Milton too, or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So will you be straight with me now that it's just us two on this train? Because I was gonna spend some time and money today to remaster some dumb old album, and I saw you here on the L train, and I was like, hey, is that Will Oldham? He must at least have some perspective, because it's like living in this town. I get so confused and wound up and uptight, and I just don't know up from down. And then we reached the last stop, and the subway was deserted. There was a long moment of silence, and I let go of his shirt. I started to think that maybe I'd made some kind of big mistake. I tried to walk out onto the platform, but by then it was too late. His sunglasses seemed to grow darker, and still he hadn't even spoke. He just came right up behind me and put his hands around my throat and threw me down onto the concrete and kicked my face in with his boot and dragged me down onto the train tracks and tied my hands back with his coat. And I was slipping out of consciousness as he was slipping down my jeans, and he was punching me and humping me, and I slipped off into a dream. So it might have just been a delusion, but I thought I heard him say something like, artists are pussies, and he climbed back up and ran away. So I lay there in the darkness on the train tracks, cold and broken. The hours passed, and I thought, well, maybe I won't remaster that old album. And then I started thinking, well, maybe it really wasn't even Will Oldham, even though he did hold my arms and fuck me, just like Will sings in A Sucker's Evening. But whether it was him or wasn't, I couldn't forget the words he'd spoken. Artists are pussies, like we're wusses, or we end up getting fucked. And other kinds of folks are dicks, tall, smart, and strong, and born to fuck us up. I know it sounds really sexist and stupid, it's a terrible analogy, but at that moment on the train tracks, it made a lot of sense to me. Maybe it's just some kind of natural balance, like two types of mental gender that's gone on in all societies in one form or another. Like some dicks are born to conquer, I probably would if I could, but if I'm just a pussy, that's okay, because in a few months maybe I'll put out something good.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Lewis, and you're listening to Two States on RTE 2XM.